So we're finally live. I'm so sorry for the technical glitch. Welcome to Samosa Talks, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great afternoon. Today we have on Samosa Talks with us Neha Ahuja. She's the head of marketing at Spotify India. And we have Mr. Arun Srinivas. He's the director of global business group at Facebook India. And we are going to discuss how branded content on Instagram can move business outcomes, and at the same time how people's consumption patterns have been all through this lockdown. So we could start with you, Neha. Neha, tell us how people have been using Spotify during the pandemic, and like how you've been using social media as well as Spotify in this time frame.
Yeah. So I think I will point out, Hitesh, that we do see a change in the consumption patterns on Spotify. The typical use cases, which were playlists for commuting to office, or Friday night with friends, or my favorite gymming playlist. All of those really weren't the most used ones, during the last 1.5 years. We saw a lot of new moments come in, like cooking or chilling with family, or dinner time with family, or just walking, right? So there were new moments that came up. Also, the spikes that we used to see over the weekends or the morning evening time, that didn't exist anymore. It was all like one plain consumption pattern. So people were consuming during the day, a little bit more equalized consumption rather than day spikes, right? So we saw that. We also recently published something what we call the Spotify Culture Next report, right, for 2021, and we called out that a lot of millennials and Gen Zs have actually adopted audio as a format for soothing themselves, right? So they are consuming audio as a format for soothing themselves, right? So
Arun, can you hear Neha?
No, I think we just lost Neha possibly.
Okay.
I'm sure she'll be back soon. Yeah.
Sure. So by the time she logs in, Arun, could you tell us how you've seen people and brands using social media during the pandemic?
Yeah, see, I think, when you say brands, I'm assuming you're talking about advertisers, right? So, or companies. Yeah. See, what's happened during the pandemic is that we have seen a dramatic surge and acceleration, where I would say that, India's digital consumption and penetration has gone, accelerated by more than 2 years thanks to the pandemic, 2-3 years. So what we thought we'll get to possibly in 2024 or 2025, we already got to that in 2020 or 2021. The reason is, I think it's forced a lot of people to reevaluate the use of digital platforms, and social media platforms like us to really discover new brands, as well as, carry out their lives and transactions here. So be it listening to music, like what Neha was alluding to, or even buying groceries. A lot more Indians, for example, are leveraging, digital platforms to transact. So what brands do with us in the pandemic is really to now reimagine and pivot their business models to digital, and then figure out a way saying, how can they build their brands through platforms like Instagram or Facebook, and, really get to the consumer in terms of what their message is. So that's really what's been happening through the pandemic. And we've seen this universally true across large, medium, and small businesses and across industries, right? So be it fashion or makeup or even cars or FMCG. So we've seen this, or even the e-commerce giants. So we've seen this across businesses in terms of a huge acceleration on how they're leveraging social media platforms to build and communicate to their audiences in this team.
And like from your perspective, has branded content become more relevant in these time frame, or you think that there's still a long way for branded content as a discipline to grow?
No, I think, see, two parts to it, right? So we've always, if you look at the media mix before the pandemic, I'm saying obviously traditional media was significantly ahead. Today, digital media is pretty close to, where television would be, right, in India. In the next few years, I'm sure digital will become the lead medium like it has in the other markets like the US. So historically, what brands have done, therefore, is really built their main message, around core traditional channels and use digital as a supplementary medium. And while there have been brands which have always wanted to use influencers, to push their cause, and we've seen this very relevant in a couple of examples I can give you is historically also, you have brands like Johnson and Johnson, using pediatricians, or Colgate using dentists, right? But you will see these more at their points. But today, what Instagram, for example, as a platform is capable of, and what it does is really bring all the constituents together. So you have brands on one side, you have celebrities or creators or influencers, as we call them, on the second side. And the third is really the audiences. And in this platform, you're really bringing all the three together. And brands therefore have an opportunity, for example, the same examples that I mentioned, whether you want to use pediatricians or dentists, to really create content on, why it's good to brush, or, how you really take care of your babies, and get doctors or dentists, etc., to really pass on this message. And that's really branded content. What brands have done post the pandemic is, obviously, given that they're spending a lot more on digital, definitely I would say it has become far more relevant because they're starting to leverage and see this. Before that, I think, most brands are still approaching it traditionally and looking at digital only as a medium additional to what I'm already exposing my audiences to as message. But here, now that it's become the mainstay medium during the pandemic, people are obviously trying to figure out what is the best business model outcome I can achieve, through digital. So that's really what we are seeing. And therefore, it's the best time really for accelerating, the reach of influencers here.
Neha's back.
Sorry, I think Hitesh, I'm now joining from my mobile data because I think something went wrong with the internet.
It's fine. Can you hear us?
I can.
So I think Arun was talking about how branded content has become more relevant in today's day and age. And while you were talking about, when you dropped out, you were mentioning about the kind of categories that people have been consuming on Spotify. So you've seen a shift from just music content to content from other genres?
No, so I mean, yes, like I said, I don't know where I got dropped off, right? So I mean, like I said, the moments of consumption have changed for sure. What we also saw that podcast consumption, did sort of uptake quite a bit, right? And within the podcast consumption, specific genres were mental health or spirituality or self-help saw a phenomenal jump in the consumption, right? And it was clearly called out, by a very in-depth study that we do, and we publish it every year, called Spotify Culture Next. And that clearly called out that the millennials and the Gen Z both believe that audio for them was healing, right? So they've adopted more and more of audio during the pandemic, right? In fact, if I remember the number correctly, about 87% of the millennials said that audio for them is healing. So the consumption of audio, whether it was music or podcast, did help them sail through the pandemic a little bit better.
Right, and I think I can vouch for it on my personal front. So while I used to do binge watching, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and
yes,
it takes your mind off a lot of things.
Yeah.
So Arun, you've also seen a rise in certain categories in terms of consumption on Instagram. Have you seen that a certain beat or genre of content is, and like what are some of the content trends you've seen on Instagram?
See, I think, it's too broad. Let me just say that, because again, as I mentioned, we bring the three constituents, right, which is audiences, creators, celebrities on one side, and brands on the other. So we've seen an explosion, frankly, across, categories and genres. But what is interesting is, see, today, as a family of apps, Facebook reaches over 400 million people in India. And what we're seeing, especially over the last few months, let's say 15th month into this, is that today almost 6 million reels are being produced on a daily basis in India alone. So that's the kind of volume of content. And interestingly, it's far more diverse, vernacular, regional, than you would expect it to be. So I think, so what we're also seeing is that clearly there's explosion of, this short form video content, for example, across the length and the breadth of the country in all kinds of languages. So that's something which, I can clearly say is a trend. So clearly you're seeing that people are adopting to these platforms, putting out their expression, on the platform in their own authentic way, in their language.
Right. I think we'll come back to Reels in some time because I have a couple of questions which we've posed for Reels. But Neha, from your perspective, I remember that one of the sessions that we had with you, we'd spoken at length about how, like you'd spoken at length about how you are a staunch believer of a client agency and a platform coming together to create some magic. So have you managed to use Instagram or branded content in particular to create some magic on the platform as Spotify?
Yeah, I think we do it all the time, Hitesh. I mean, I don't think branded content is like a new lever or a new age thing, right? We've always done it. And I think it's pretty much part of the multimedia mix that we have for every campaign, right? So it's a given that we will have it through the year, right? I think talking specifically of what we want to achieve with branded content at Spotify is to bridge the gap between awareness and affinity, right? So we do a lot of large scale ATL campaigns, go all out, blast our 30 seconder. But I think what helps build affinity is, always on kind of, branded content pieces. Right. The second thing that I want to mention for branded content is that specifically at Spotify, we make sure that we layer our storytelling, which we are all suckers for, with more topical conversations or topical mood, which then helps, bring in more conversations, bring in more relatability. So that's the other thing. And I think we also have the benefit of working and collaborating very closely with the artists and the influencers, right? So we make sure that we leverage that piece of fandom on a platform like Instagram, and that helps us then to to fuel a full funnel approach for marketing. And this is almost like myth busting, right? Because we've always used branded content for building affinity or top of the funnel, but at Spotify we do it for building affinity. We use it for building consumption and engagement. We also use it for retention, right? So it's a pretty full funnel approach for us when it comes to branded content.
And what is that one campaign that you're really proud of at Spotify from a branded content perspective, again, which has helped you move business outcomes, like you said?
So I think the one that comes to my mind, Hitesh, is something that we did for Holi, and this was on Reels. We were in the middle of a lockdown, right? And Holi was a very topical event to talk about. What was also sort of very different this year was that we were in a lockdown. So we wanted to be with our friends and family, but we could not be with them, right? So I think we married all of this, that, there is Holi, people consume music. They also want to, want to be with their friends. They can't. They also consume a lot of music and celebrate. So we really combined all of this and partnered with the Instagram Reels, where they helped us actually get 40 creators on board, and each one of them actually called out that how one can use Spotify playlists and share these Spotify playlists with their loved ones, and actually have the biggest Reels Holi party. So we called the event as the biggest Reels Holi party. And I think that was something really, really memorable. Even, I mean, from a brand metrics point of view, but also business metrics point of view. And it was really talked about.
Right. And in general, I believe that there is always a push for, like a pull for Holi playlists on Spotify during that time frame.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there is. Of course, Holi playlist gets consumed, but we were worried that, when people are not really celebrating or they're not going out, will this consumption go down year on year? But that's why we partnered with Instagram, and we said that can we do something which is more virtual, but still keeps the spirit of being with friends and celebrating with music. So yeah, that was the thought behind it. Yeah.
And Arun, from your perspective as Instagram, which are some of the brands you've noticed that have used branded content quite well during the pandemic or even otherwise?
Yeah, see, so I can give you a few examples. Of course, Spotify leads, the list with some amazing numbers, especially, and I think they were one of the first adopters of Reels as well in India. So I think kudos to Neha and team for that. So some of the other examples I can give you is, we did a couple of campaigns on, consumer products, one with Close Up and one with Red Label. And both were very interesting once again, where we leveraged branded content and create the power of creators here. So Close Up, for example, the toothpaste, is obviously iconically famous for bringing people closer, literally, or, getting, let's say, their whole current manifestation of getting people closer together is freedom to love. And what they thought was, while you obviously are able to communicate this message, in mass media, through a TVC, etc., as part of their branded content initiative, what they did was, and this was on Instagram itself, not on Reels, and I'll come to Reels specifically. What they did was actually get 4 couples who broke societal norms in this whole freedom to love, and stood for freedom to love in some sense. And these were authentic stories, about, let's say, an younger man, older woman, and interreligion marriage, or a couple, for example, who only travel before, of course, the pandemic, almost 300 days a year, and want to really explore the world. So again, not living by the conventional societal norms, of really like on finding their own, let's say, path and their freedom to love. So what we saw is, while they put out their authentic stories, obviously these got millions of shares and likes. And Close Up actually post campaign, since we measured this, also got a 450 basis point increase in ad recall, as a brand and what it stood for. Similarly, on the other hand, Red Label, for example, they have a proposition of unstereotype, because I think we classify and bucket people into certain stereotypes that we expect. And they got creators again from various personalities, spanning different people. For example, they had Dia Mirza, who talked about how actresses were typecast and you wrote only certain roles for them. Neena Gupta, for example, who talked about how difficult it is once you, are a senior citizen, and what kind of roles you get in Bollywood. Or equally, Shaheen Butt, where we again talk about mental health, and not everyone is comfortable about those conversations, right? So how again are you bringing these to the forefront? And Red Label actually, again, and all this, obviously they brought the brand into the conversation. They were authentically talking into the camera. They were, making either a cup of tea or drinking tea. And we saw post campaign again with the digital audience, Red Label, while again it's an iconic brand that's been there for many years, saw an 800 basis point in recall, with this whole proposition. So, you're able to, I guess, bring the power of authentic storytelling from creators, on a platform like Instagram, and still do what brands do best, which is deliver their message, in an interesting way. Because I don't think the audience wants to see the same creative, just like, like if I were to give an example, you don't put out the same creative on, let's say, TV, print, and outdoor. You customize it for each, right? Saying, for example, I need to grab eyeballs as I drive past this, let's say, intersection. So obviously your message is slightly different. Your visual may be far more impactful there. So here again, you'll have to really find a way, in terms of leveraging creators through heartwarming stories. And I'm sure that, as I said, brands, can really see meaningful business outcomes. Yeah.
So this is one question for both of you. What is the best way, according to you, to leverage branded content? And like you could share some tips as well, and you could share some things that you have observed, like in your positions as a platform and as a brand. Like Neha, probably you could give it.
Sure. So I think, Hitesh, there are 3 things that I would urge everybody to keep in mind while working on branded content, right? And you can take that as tips or principles or whatever, right? And I think we do this all the time. Number one, I think always try to hit a nerve, right? Whether it is via a topical conversation or it is via a very strong insight, right? You need to hit a nerve. So that's very critical, right? The second thing is that and this is worked for us completely, is that leverage your personality. And specifically talking of, if you're going on a platform like Reels, uh, this is the opportunity to leverage fandom, because if you use a personality, you are talking to your user via the right mouth, right? So they already have an established audience, they already have an attraction for their personality. It always soothes the message as you do that, right? And the third thing, and I would say the most important, would be that there needs to be a seamless product story, right? Don't try and fit something in if there isn't something there for your product there, right? And we call it often right to win or right to say it. To give an example, for Spotify, I can talk about women empowerment, right? And how we should talk about, or how we should promote more women in audio. But it's completely irrelevant for Spotify to talk about body shaming, so stay in your zone. Even if the topical conversations or the buzz is something else, you don't need to jump in if you don't have the right to say it, if you don't seamlessly fit in, right? A lot of brands and marketers do have that urge to jump into that conversation, but I think we should refrain. It doesn't have any long lasting impact. So I think these three things is something that I would keep in mind. One mistake that we often make when we are working on branded content is don't measure everything, concentrate on the learning, right? What we do is we measure everything and learn nothing. So, because there's so much data when you do something digitally, right? You're like, okay, this was my funnel, this is the reach, this is the awareness, this is the click through, this is my adoption. So you get just so consumed by these numbers that you sometimes lose the bigger picture or the bigger impact of branded content. Yep.
Arun, what are your thoughts?
I'd say firstly, find a way to be authentic and interesting. Because I don't think people want to see the, same thing literally like what you have said, as a commercial to come out as branded content, right? I mean, you don't need it. You can just run it as an ad then. A lot of brands sometimes make this mistake that they want, the same looking, lovely filmed visuals, etc. Because, then you lose when you're, I mean, it's no longer authentic, right? Where it's shot on somebody's phone and, as a creator. So that's the first challenge. The second is, as what Neha said, the message has to be very powerful. You have to think through saying, for example, even on simple things like what I gave you an example on freedom to love, etc. How can you still provoke and bring topics that are socially relevant and, stretch the boundaries so that, you get the right creators to talk about those. That would be number two. And the third is, there are different, I would say, ways we can still do this on static, or just video and reels, right? So again, follow the principles, because what works on, let's say, someone talking through branded content on video may not necessarily work as a format on reels, which might need a little more song and dance, etc. So you have to still, adapt for each medium in terms of, leveraging, the whole platform.
And so, like, we'll come back, like, we'll now come to Reels, because, like, you'd mentioned about Reels earlier as well. So, like, we know that the past 1.5 years, like, Reels has been talked about a lot. And even from a creation standpoint, Reels as a format is on the rise. From a consumption standpoint, I think there's a lot of users who are hooked to Reels as a medium. So how do you see Reels as Instagram in India at this point? And specifically, because I remember when Reels was launched and, like, we had initial sessions with Instagram teams, the focus was on entertainment. The focus was more on the user side of things, and, like, conversations on how brands would use Reels were very limited, or, like, those were conversations people were threading from Facebook Thumbstoppers program, or, like, creating short videos at that point in time. So how do you see Reels evolving for brands?
Yeah. No, great question. See, I think, our endeavor has always been to build the user experience first, get that right, get users onto the platform, and then figure out ways where we can bring brands and advertising into it, right? So that's been always, at the, back of our mind. Reels is now more than a year old in India. And, for the last literally 2 months is when we really started, I would say, advertising on it, and where brands have started leveraging the Reels surface, to really drive their messages. See, for us, the way as I see it is that within Instagram itself, you have, the feed, then you have stories, you have IGTV, you have Reels. There are users who come and surface, browse through all four. There are users who only go to one of the four. So our approach to brands and advertising has always been that figure out who you're talking to, and then, we can figure out, once you're clear on the target audience, what they consume and how you develop the right assets for each of them. So for example, you could land the same message, like I gave you an example on, let's say, keeps your teeth clean or kills germs, etc., through a poll, for example, and, just get, so that also lands the message, as well as obviously a reel or a video, right? So our endeavor has always been to encourage advertisers to make sure they create for each surface and really deploy their assets accordingly so that they get the maximum impact. Now, coming specifically to Reels, what we've seen is in the last couple of months, we've seen some early experiments which are very interesting and very diverse. So, for example, Nykaa has launched recently their ranges of makeup under the Nykaa brand on foundation and eyeshadow. And what they did this time differently was they got some makeup creators to apply it on themselves and show how differently you could look with multiple looks on using the same product, rather than just being a static ad. So you got people, who are personalities themselves, who had followership. And I think Reels is also unique in India that unlike Instagram, where you normally, the rest of Instagram, where you normally will only get to see the feed and stories of people you follow, in Reels, you can actually search for content. So if I'm really somebody who loves music or loves makeup or loves fashion, etc., I can browse for Reels which really only talk about those, right? So in that sense, you're able to discover a lot more. So Nykaa did this. HDFC Bank actually, again, one of the early pioneers in starting to advertise on Reels, did a public service message on Reels, and that actually was received very well. So we all know that there's a lot of spammers and financial fraud happening where people reach out for UPI handles and, con a lot of other people. So they ran a very innovative campaign, instead of just issuing a press ad saying issued in public interest, they did a Muh Band Karo, hashtag Muh Band Karo campaign, where they got creators to actually, and created a jingle around it so that it was memorable, and in fact, it's live, we have more than 600K views as we speak. So that again is a very great way of, just grabbing attention and, just telling people who you are and what you want the message to be. So these are some of, let's say a couple of examples that, I can think of immediately, apart from, of course, Spotify, who has been a pioneer in leveraging Reels during Holi, and that really set, I think, for us also, it was a great learning to bring 40 creators, collaborate with Neha and the Spotify team, and really see what this could be in terms of reach and impact.
And so, Neha, like Arun said, that Spotify has been one of the early movers for Reels. And so, like, what was your thought and rationale behind investing in Reels as a platform? Because I understand that Reels at this point defines the mood of the nation to an extent. It tells you what is happening in the outer world. Then there is so much that happens on Reels, from trends to challenges and so on. So where, like, what was your rationale behind investing in Reels in the first place, and like, how did you come to a point that okay, you have to do this activation with 40 creators and create a holy experience for them using music?
So I think, like I mentioned, it is that for us, we also use Reels for mid funnel, right? So it's not always about talking about, what is Spotify? It's a music streaming app. It's free, right? We also go mid funnel with the artists and the creators, right? And we know that, these creators or these artists are huge on Instagram, right, with millions and millions of followers, and that's exactly what we wanted to leverage. I mean, if there is a Neha Kakkar, of there is a Badsha that has a huge fandom on Instagram, and they are the ones who are also consuming the holy playlist. They are also the ones who have their music in that holy playlist, they are very happy talking about it. It's also our total, it's our zone to, call out that, hey, we working with Barsha. They have their songs in a holy playlist, and this is, the most topical playlist. So, I mean, it was from it. It was a tick mark from many angles for us, right? Leveraging fandom, making sure that it sounds authentic, like Arun said, that the artist himself is saying that, hey, listen to my songs. I have these songs in this playlist and I am streaming this. So, share these songs with your friends on Holy and stream this, right? So and of course, we, end of the day, we did see that, the consumption of the playlist and which is the DAUs and the streams, both went up, because of this, leveraging the fandom. And we often do this for, if we just want to launch a playlist, or we just want to launch a new track, from an artist, right, or an influencer, where we can leverage fandom. And the other way to, sort of evaluate is that if we see a trend already working, and this is, a very recent example. We've just launched a campaign called Dil Filmi To Suno Filmi. And we saw that some of the users were remixing this ad, right? So, I mean, their reaction or how they would react to this was something that we saw organically come up on reels, and we kind of fueled it a little bit more, and it then just took off, right? And not only among the Hindi users, but there was Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, and we saw this remix of our ads, which was so much fun, that we almost felt like fueling it ourselves. So yeah, and I mean, it's what more joyful for a marketer, right? That, you seeing your ads being remixed organically on reels.
And like speaking of, like you said that there is a correlation between song trending on Instagram Reel or some piece of music trending on Instagram Reel to how it is being consumed on Spotify as well. So, like, what is the correlation like according to you? Do you see that a song is really picking up on Reels and then it also moves top of the charts on Spotify, or you see that on Spotify there are some top of the chart songs which are then trending on Instagram Reels as well?
So I think it's a chicken and egg situation, Nitesh. I don't know what fuels what, but yes, clearly, I think what we call this scenario is, we are in a social music zone, right? So whatever is getting consumed on the music apps, we definitely see that come up on the social apps as well, right? So it's all a social music evolution happening right now.
And Arun, from your perspective, apart from entertainment and music as a category, which other brands you think are very likely to do Reels ads and are likely to get, or which categories, so to say, are likely to get more rub off from Reels? Like I know you gave examples of Close Up and Red Label as well, but then on a larger, like on a larger point of view, which brands or which categories you think are likely to benefit with Reels as a format from an ad point of view?
Yeah, I think Reels does two things, right? One is it's it generates impact rapidly, because obviously you're able to build buzz very rapidly, to say what's trending, and if you find a way like what some of these brands have done to really get to a large reach number at scale, and really also keep your message short. So I think it builds buzz and impact very rapidly, right? So for us, we think that almost every category that we can think of, who we serve today would be able to use it. I'll give you a couple of more examples. See, Oppo did this with Ranbir Kapoor recently. So they again have him as an ambassador. They feature him in the ads. So what they did was they did again a hashtag Say It with Ranbir, where people were able to connect with him on Reels. And obviously, I think as part of the campaign, Kareena and Karishma also ended up messaging him, because they saw it on their reel. So that's how it's also organic, right? And obviously their followers end up seeing it. So you can imagine then it has a, ripple effect in terms of how, the phone becomes more buzzworthy at that point of time, right? So that's really what, let's say, another category like that. As we speak, we're also talking to many other categories, as I said, across the spectrum. So whether it is fashion, makeup, whether it is auto car, new cars, etc. All of these guys are thinking of saying, what do I need to really do to really build impact around my news or my launch, leveraging reels. So that's really where most of the other sectors also are at.
And which other sector, like apart from
whether it is auto car, new cars, etc. All of these guys are thinking of saying, what do I need to really do to really?
Yeah. So Arun, and apart from this, what are some of the tips you would suggest for brands to use Reels ads as a format? Like what should be the, like I was asking Neha that there are certain triggers or certain things she identified before investing on Reels as a format. But from your perspective, what are some of the factors brands should look at before investing on Reels?
See, firstly, I'd say that brands who already have a creator or a celebrity ethos around them, they should certainly leverage this, right? Because the let's say any of the cricket A-listers or Bollywood A-listers who endorse a certain brand, you should find an interesting way to really do the same message on why this is a great product, be it a shoe or a clothing, etc., through reels, leveraging the celebrity, because you are already standing for something with the celebrity, because that's what your message is. Now you're able to bring that with more buzz and impact. So that would be, number one. Number two is, I think all new launches, for example, because see, like there's a ton of launches on products, right? Around clothing, around shoes, around beauty products, or equally even around phones and cars. So how do you really stand out from the clutter? So we see that as a huge use case, where you can find a way to figure out what is the ethos again of your brand, and what's the innovation around your product and what's trending. Find a, if there is synergy around, let's say the current trends or causes, there is Reels is a great platform again to really build, rapid buzz. So we see this as the second principle. So I think the two use cases we really see would be around, wherever there are celebrities, because you can, as Neha pointed out, see again, from a full funnel marketing approach, one is you can build awareness through reels. The second one is you can also build consideration, as we call it, through reels, right? So when you go down to really talk more about my attributes, because there's only that much you can do, for example, on any ad, right? I mean, like people just register that this is a new phone, this is let's say this is the model number, and maybe they'll pick out one feature. But imagine if I have 8 different things to talk about, I can create a set of 8 reels, to talk only about the camera, for example, or only about how lightweight it is or how durable the battery is, again, leveraging, let's assume, the same ambassador. So, you're able to do a lot more, and build, I'd say, the, right messaging with your target audience. So that's something, again, that Reels offers in terms of building consideration.
Got it. So Neha, I have one question for you from comments on LinkedIn. Someone's asking, how does personalization play a role in this context? Spotify does an amazing job on in personalizing their communication. So how do you aim at personalization? Like how do you aim at getting personalization at scale with the branded content on Instagram or with the real use cases that you've built so far?
I think I wouldn't take all the credit. I think it's the algorithms at Spotify and Instagram together who make it, who that makes the message so personalized. So see, we know who are the top artists in languages, right? We know what is the kind of music that's trending within that language genre, right? And that we use in our communication, in our branded content. But I think we partner with platforms like Instagram or like Facebook that help us then target this branded content to the right user as well, right? Which then helps you serve so much better. So I think it's a shared credit between the two algorithms.
Right. And so there's one more question on how do you think small businesses or home-based businesses should look at branded content and reels? Like either you or Arun both can take this.
Sure. I mean, the only thing that I would, suggest to keep in mind is that, and Arun did point that out, is that look at branded content to be different from an ATL campaign, right? It's not it's not a 30-second message. It's not an outdoor that you're blasting to, millions and millions of people and will stay, and you need a frequency on that, right? We should evaluate a good branded content as a two-way communication, right? Why are we doing this? It's not about Spotify making 4 reels or making 10 reels. End of the day, I want hundreds and thousands of people to participate in that, to be part of that, right? So it needs to be, I'll repeat myself, it needs to hit a nerve, right? It needs to be relevant, it needs to be super simple, because if it's not super simple, if it's not relevant, it's not hitting that nerve, it will not drive either shareability or participation, which is the objective, right? That's how you want the branded content to be responded with.
Right. Arun, you have something to add to this?
Yeah, see, again, I think, it depends on honestly what the business objectives are. So for a small and medium business, I think the first task would be to really put your proposition out there, in terms of who you are, what you stand for. And I'm just saying for independent, let's say, home-based creators, I think, let's say if I'm a chef, I would really want to put out 100 videos of recipes, first figure out, and get some followership. I myself will become an influencer for some other business, if you know what I mean, right? Rather than me trying to push my own, unless I'm in the business of manufacturing stuff, I would rather leverage, chefs, for example, for foods businesses. We see that all the time when foods companies ask us, to say that, who are the top foods creators. And, if they have a campaign only specifically, hypothetically in Andhra tomorrow, they can run that only in Andhra Pradesh with, let's say chefs who are based there. And the same is true in beauty, etc. So I think if you're a creator, I would say, figure out what works for your audience and keep innovating, and, followership will happen, I guess, basis on what your ethos is. And brands will come knocking on your door. Equally, if you're a small business, I think my first advice would be put out your proposition and what you stand for clearly, cohort that to different audiences, scale it up before you go to branded content. Yeah.
I hope, Sijo, I hope that answers your question. So there's one more question, and I think any one of you can take it, or both of you can take it. So the question is, when it comes to branded content, do you think Indian brands and agencies are at par with global counterparts? Many say that India is yet to witness its Lego movie moment. If you guys could share your opinion on where we as Indian creators and creators stand as opposed to global counterparts in terms of branded content.
I mean, I can have a short answer. I mean, I've seen a lot of great work, that brands have done, but maybe Arun, you can share, a more comparative view of, how India stands versus the global, communication or creatives.
Yeah, see, I think, leveraging the power of influencers in a large country like us, with also so many diverse languages and cultures has not been easy, right? See, I'll give an example. When I come from the brand world, right? When I was on the other side, I always used to look for, let's say, experts on beauty or experts on food, to push our brands. And the challenge is you'll find 2 or 3, but they will never have the scale, nationally to really cut through and make appeal. I think what Instagram has done actually is to democratize that. And tomorrow, for example, for any makeup launch or food launch, you can actually sign up 30, 40, 50, 100 creators as well, right? And really get your message across in every state in this country or every major city in this country. So I think we are still, the answer is absolutely bang. The question is absolutely bang on. I think we are still early days here. Having said that, I think brands historically have always tried to find ways of associating with properties in the real world, and how do you really build that in the virtual world? So I'll give you an example, Lakme Fashion Week has always been there, so it's something that you associate, or even, let's say, even if I look at physical golf resorts, etc., like what Wills used to do. So I'm saying these things have existed. I think it's a question is how brands really take to the digital medium and start owning and building, properties is something that I think we will see coming of age. At least that's my perspective. Neha, over to you now.
I'll just add one thing, and I know Arun, you come from that world, but I think as marketers, the problem that you also face is that India is not one country, right? So there isn't one piece of branded content that will do the job. It's not a Germany, it's not Italy, it's not one piece of content, and the consumer is very heterogeneous, right? So what will work in one pocket will not work, right? There isn't any spill, so one has to be mindful of that. That's also a big difference. While we talk about, there is a Lego moment or a BMW moment that happened in other countries, there can't be one single branded content that will work across the country.
True, true. And while Arun, you were mentioning about properties, there's one question about IPs as well, saying creating a one, like what would you recommend to a brand creating a one-time branded content piece as opposed to developing an IP like a Coke Studio or the one that you mentioned, say like Fashion Week, or there is any other IP like there is a Mintra Fashion Superstar. So what in your opinion works better in today's day and age?
See, I give an example. Let's take Mintra Fashion Superstar, actually, right? So, what their ethos is that I think they will do that regularly, right? Which might be every year or so. And they will still leverage branded content to get through the message. I'm just saying, for example, to really talk about, how they can still be seen as the number one fashion destination, because that's their business objective, right? In terms of, as the number one fashion destination on the internet. I think that's really what brands were trying to do. So, see, the answer is if you are very clear on what you stand for over the, let's say, next 5 years or 10 years, and really want to build from there, you can certainly leverage branded content even with a property like the ones you mentioned, even virtually. But if you really want to equally leverage branded content for every campaign, and for example, because different industries have different rhythms, right? So, for example, if I take a mobile phone company, they have multiple tiers of products, and within that they have multiple launches and improvements every year. So you still have to find a way to reach the message that what's new in this phone, through your influencers. So you may not be able to stay true to one larger cause, if you know what I mean. So I think it will be case to case, in terms of what the business objective for the company is. But it is certainly possible in this digital world to do that as well, in terms of creating these properties.
Neha, you have something to add to this?
No, I think it totally depends, on what category you are, and do you have the right to do that or not. I also feel that there is a right time to enter the IP world, right? I mean, if you are too new and there is still a brand getting established, I'm not too sure if you should dive into creating an IP versus helping the consumer understand what you stand for first.
I think I know you have a hard stop, so we'll wrap up the session with one last question, and that is common for you both. Given that Reels as a platform or as a format is picking up and consumption is moving towards short video content, what are some of the guardrails you would define for a brand who's willing to invest in short video content or short form content? And we can wrap it up from there. Neha, you could start.
No, I think let Arun start. I mean, the best person to give brands some advice on how to go about it.
Yeah.
No, again, as I said, I think be clear, stay true to your core message first, because Reels is still a medium. So if your message, whatever it is, right, like that you're the destination for fashion, or you're the best toothpaste that removes germs, you find a way to stay true to the core message, get authentic voices, firstly to do any kind of branded content, and within that, obviously, do it in a very interesting way in short form video in Reels. So because otherwise you could get you run the risk of being lost, with the volume of content that's being produced every day, right? So you will still have to find a way to really be clutter breaking, because that's what it will need to do to really stand out as a trend.
Got it. Neha?
Yeah, I think Arun put it very nicely in 1, 2, 3, points. I will just summarize and say that, treat it like a piece of content. It is supposed to entertain, it is supposed to invite users to participate. It is not your 30-second film, it is a piece of content that you're expecting your user to consume and enjoy and get entertained with, right? So let that be the lens.
All right. Thank you guys. Thanks a lot for sparing our time for this. It was great interacting with you too. I hope that we get more chances and opportunities to do so in the near future. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Hitesh. Thanks, Neha. Thanks.